Folks, this is police off the cuff. We're going to join the press conference that's right in progress right now in regards to the shooting in Lewiston, Maine.
St Pierre for the city of Lewiston, and some other members of his command staff are present. What I will say to the city of Lewiston, and you know this because you feel it every day, but you're lucky to have a chief like Chief St Pierre and his entire law enforcement agency, from every level. Those officers put their heart and their soul on the line on behalf of their community last night and into today. And they're doing it for the right reasons. They do it because they care. So the city of Lewiston and truly our co-responder family across the state of Maine is lucky to have Dave and his team in the mix with us. And we're also going to hear from Colonel William Ross from the Maine State Police. And Bill will highlight some of the timeline things that you're probably concerned about and certainly interested in from a story perspective. So the Colonel will come up and speak to that. And we'll also have Jody Cohen. And Jody is the special agent in charge for the FBI out of the Boston field office. And Jody will highlight some of those federal partnerships and some of the things that our federal partners are bringing to the table, bringing to bear to help us with this investigation. We also have a bunch of people here. Once you start naming people, you're going to have a problem because you're going to forget somebody or screw something up. But I would also tell you that a couple of our other federal partners are here. Kevin Neal, who's the U.S. Marshal for the District of Maine. We also have James Ferguson, and Jim is the special agent in charge from the ATF for the Boston Field Division. They are heavily invested with staff along with the FBI, and we can't thank them enough for all that they're doing on behalf of our state. I would also tell you that we are going to close with a brief Q&A, and we're going to try to get some of those questions out there. We appreciate your time, your patience, your professionalism, your partnership in getting this information out. I would think that those questions are going to be brief because, again, we do have a suspect at large. And while you can help us with that, we also need to get back to our team to push forward on that. So with that in mind, I will be back up to the podium to kind of steer that a little bit. But for starters, I would like Chief St Pierre to.
Thank you, Director Sawchuk, and welcome media partners. And thank you, Governor Mills, for those kind words. I'm going to keep this short. What I would like the very most is to express our deepest sympathies to the families and friends of the victims of this heinous crime. This is truly a tragedy that goes beyond comprehension. I'm confident in our community, that our community has and will continue to come together throughout this endeavor to bring this to a successful conclusion. Although difficult, I do ask the public to continue to be mindful of their own personal safety and also that they be patient with the process as much as possible. There is extensive work and attention to detail that goes into such a large-scale investigation. I'm confident in the expertise and professionalism of our investigators and all law enforcement officials that are currently involved. This is an all hands-on deck approach. We have a great deal of collaboration and resources that have been made available to us. There are far too many to name individually, but I think Director Sawchuk named quite a few appropriately. There are far too many, as I stated, but they're all appreciated more than you know. I want to thank all of our brave men and women of the Lewiston Police Department, Fire Department staff, medical personnel, first responders of any kind that came from far and wide and have come together and continue to work tirelessly in bringing the situation to an end. We hope to locate and hold the person accountable. The state taking the lead in this investigation, although that we are working hand in hand with them. I think Colonel Ross will be able to fill you in on a little bit more.
Thank you, Chief. First and foremost, this is an ongoing homicide investigation and search for the person that is responsible for it. We're in the early stages of this investigation, and I just want to let you know we will have updates. We'll be putting some type of a schedule out later on. But again, early stages of a homicide investigation, we want to be careful that we're doing things correctly. We want to get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to give you a bit of a timeline here to kind of fill in some of the blanks and give you some of the facts as we know them right now. A lot of this information will then be transferred to the Attorney General's office as they will be the lead prosecutor, again, in any homicide investigation. Last night, October 25th at approximately 6:56 p.m., the Auburn Communications Center received a 911 call of a male shooting in just-in-time or the spare time recreation center in the town of Lewiston, located at 24 Mollison Way in Lewiston. Shortly after that, at about 7:08 p.m., the Communications Center received multiple 911 calls about an active shooter inside of a Schmenge's Billiards at 553 Lincoln Street in the town of Lewiston. A large law enforcement response from multiple surrounding agencies assisted the Lewiston Police Department in trying to identify who this individual was and what was happening. As you can imagine, this was a very fast-paced, fast-moving, very fluid scene, very dangerous scene that these guys and girls were going into. 18 people are now deceased at this time. The victims at the just-in-time establishment, 7 people are deceased there, 1 female and 6 males, all from an apparent gunshot wound. Victims at the Schmegley's Billiards, 8 are deceased. 7 males inside the establishment, 1 male outside of the establishment. Again, also apparent gunshot wounds. Multiple people were transferred to area hospitals, Central Maine Medical Center, St. Mary's, and Maine Medical Center. 3 people that were transferred to those hospitals are deceased, for a total of 18 people deceased at this time. The investigation into the person responsible for this identified a vehicle located at the Projebscott boat landing in Lisbon. That person, through the registration of that vehicle, was identified, as been stated earlier, as a Robert Card, born in 1983. Several of the deceased have been identified, and their families, next of kin, have been notified. Approximately 8 people at this point have been identified. 10 of these victims still need to be identified at this time. Currently, there is an arrest warrant for 8 counts of murder for Mr. Card. And the reason it's 8 counts because 10 people have not yet been identified. As those people are identified, the counts will probably go to the total of 18. He should be considered armed and dangerous. Based on our investigation, we believe this is someone that should not be approached. This is someone that should be, if you come into any contact with this individual or someone that you think looks like this individual, you were to call 911, and I'll provide some tip line numbers at the conclusion of my briefing. Lewiston Police Department, federal, state, county, and other local municipalities are involved in a coordinated search at this moment for this individual. So there's the ongoing investigation, and there's a search to apprehend this person, both happen simultaneously. I can't stress this enough. This is an ongoing investigation in the early stages. More information will come out in conjunction with the Attorney General's office as the lead prosecutor. We can't share all of our information right now, and I'm sure you understand that. I'm going to give out 2 numbers that go to a tip line. 911 is also appropriate for this, but if anyone can call these 2 numbers, this would go to the state police tip line. Area code 207-213-9526, 207-509-9002. And we'll be sending something out later that has that information in it if you weren't able to grab that now. Again, this is a very fluid situation. We have a lot of resources, as Chief St Pierre had mentioned earlier, that are on the ground in a coordinated effort to apprehend this individual. We've notified the Department of Education, and they have determined what they're going to do with the schools. A lot of schools, area schools, were shut down today based on our conversation with them. Again, as more information comes in, we'll provide it to you. Thank you for your time. This is a very difficult time for, I think, the community of Lewiston, difficult time for obviously the victims' families. And it's a tough time for law enforcement. It was a rough night last night. But we're committed to bringing whoever's responsible this to justice. And again, we are currently looking for Mr. Card right now, someone that we'd like to apprehend. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. And FBI Special Agent in Charge, Cohen, you can join me, please.
Thank you. My name is Jody Cohen. I'm the Special Agent in charge of FBI Boston Division, which covers the state of Maine. Our hearts go out to everyone who was impacted as a result of the senseless violence. The FBI is working hand in hand with our law enforcement partners. Our evidence response team is here processing these very extensive teams. We are providing investigative and tactical support, as well as our victim specialists are working with those affected by this tragedy. As this very active investigations continues to unfold, we're asking the public to stay vigilant and come forward with any information that you might have that you feel is helpful to our investigators. My pledge is that the FBI will carry out this investigative case with rigor. We will work day and night alongside our law enforcement partners to get the answers to the questions this community deserves. We thank the public for your continued cooperation and patience as we continue to work this very active investigation. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I would say that the reality here from a resource standpoint is that when we've asked for anything, the answer has been yes, period. Tactical teams, evidence response teams, full-blown investigative units, detective units that have come from multiple states, whether it's the commissioners from Vermont, New Hampshire reaching out to me directly, Massachusetts saying, what do you need, Mike? What can we do for the state of Maine? So we are now prepared to try to take a few questions. And keep in mind, again, that we may not be able to answer as in-depth as you would like, and we don't plan on taking a great deal of questions. I think follow-up press events will allow for that. Sir?
No one has really talked about the weapon that was used here, AR style, so hope someone can talk about that. But the other thing here is there are reports that this individual had mental health issues, that he made threats to shoot up the National Guard. So clearly there were some signs there that he was on someone's radar. The question becomes, why was he in possession of this weapon? And certainly, why wasn't he stopped sooner?
Yeah, I think those are all valid questions, and certainly questions that we are looking into now, but not questions that we can answer today. Considering that this occurred last night, there's still an active search for the suspect in question. So I appreciate those questions, but not something we're going to be able to answer right now.
Is it something that you're investigating and looking?
It is certainly one of those things that we want to follow up on, all aspects of that.
Why does it?
Go ahead, right here. Yes.
Can you give us a sense of the ages of who has died, how many are under 18 and how many are over 18?
I'm not sure we have that information with us today. We wanted to break it down by gender because that's something we had readily available. We did not break this down into age ranges at all.
Sir, what can you tell us about the background of the suspect in this case, or I should say the person of interest, because I noticed the language is very clear. You're saying person of interest, not suspect. So why use that terminology, and what can you tell us about his background?
Yeah, I think we used person of interest last night for half of the room that was here for that press event. As the Colonel had mentioned, there is now arrest warrants for murder for this particular individual, Mr. Card. So he is viewed as a suspect, and there is a full court press by all of our partners to bring him into custody. What was the second piece of that question?
What can you tell us about his background? Someone had asked a second ago about the idea that he had voiced concerns about his own mental health, right? Had been committed, according to language in a police bulletin, to a mental health facility for weeks. How could someone that fits that profile still be in possession of semi-automatic weapons?
Well, I do think that the statutes around firearms and the possession of those are pretty complex. I know that we will be reviewing that information as we move forward, but that's not an answer that we're prepared to give today. But that leads to motive. You're talking about behavioral health issues and how that impacts this situation. I would expect you'll hear back from us on that in the future. Right here, sir.
Yeah, I've got a question about we've seen helicopters as far as looking at this month, but can you tell us anything
Yeah, sure. So we have law enforcement assets that are deployed over a number of communities, doing follow-ups on a number of different things. So as you can imagine, there's a great deal of search warrants that we're following up on. We do have partners, that helicopters from the New Hampshire State Police. That copter was here last night to assist us as well. So whether we have tactical elements out or we're searching an area, some of those air assets would be very, very valuable. So that's what they're doing. We're not going to speak to what brings us to a specific community one way or the other. Yes, ma'am.
So
Right here.
identifying the unidentified victims, what are people encouraged to do? Is there DNA being, tested for family members who may have missing loved ones? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so we did have a family reunification center open last night. We do have behavioral health liaisons that are fully engaged to work with families and work with loved ones and work with victims for that matter that may be in the hospital and seeking treatment. So those things are actively occurring. We are dealing with each one of those situations separately. So do we need DNA on that? Are we just waiting to find a loved one, some kind of family member that we can make a notification? I think that varies across the board. I'm going to take two more questions. Right here.
Yeah, so if it's some sort of triggering event, that's something that you're investigating.
I think we're always concerned around motive. That you say triggering event, that's a motive for us. Again, that's not something we're prepared to discuss today, but I do appreciate the question. It's clearly something that's important. One additional follow-up from you.
Can you help us understand why these locations, why this bar, why this bowling alley? Let's look into someone, let's see if it was something.
I think that does speak to motive, so I appreciate the follow-up, but not something we're going to be prepared to answer today. I have one more question. Right here. Right here.
You say, is card first off, to clarify, there was warrants issued today, and can you say if card is still in the state or he's still not?
Well, we're actively searching for him. If I knew the answers to those questions, then this would be a different press conference, I would assume. So we don't know his location, and I'll leave it at that. And we are working with the Attorney General's office. So with that in mind, we're done taking questions for now. So we are going to actually take off at this point. Thank you very much for being here.
Sir, you're not, have there been any credible items? I mean, we've not really gotten many answers. So
Thank you.
So folks, that's the press conference. A lot of questions were answered. You can imagine how horrific this must be for a community to have a shooting like this. They confirmed the numbers for the first time, and the numbers actually can also change as people that were wounded perhaps succumb, unfortunately, to the gunshot wounds. The numbers that they gave was 18 dead and 13 injured. Just absolutely horrific. How are they going to move on as a community? And the horrible thing right now is that this individual named, and again, they now use the terminology, he's a perp, he's a wanted perp. They have 8 different arrest warrants for the 8 homicide victims who have been identified. And as you see on the screen, his name is Robert Card. He's a trained firearms instructor. He's believed to be in the Army Reserve. Apparently, he had made threats. He's got a mental health history. Made threats to shoot up a National Guard base in Maine. Local law enforcement is now, this is updated, is naming him. He is absolutely a suspect. And we had some better pictures of him as the night wore on. The pictures, obviously, from the video of the actual cameras at the locations. You know, some of the questions that were asked also is, why did he choose these 2 locations? Is there significance to that? And they were Shemengi's Bar and the Spartan Recreation Bowling Alley. Now, is there some reason why he chose those 2 locations? And they were not ready, or they weren't able to say why he chose those locations. In these situations, these incidents are always fluid. They're always moving. That's why when we came on the air last night, as this was unfolding. And usually 60-70% of the information that comes out is absolute nonsense, because you get people somewhat just hearing things and not vetting things. As you recall, last night they had put it out there that 22 were dead and 50 to 60 injured. Now they've revised that to actually 18 dead, which is a horrific number also, and 13 injured, but certainly not 50 to 60 injured. So this is always changing, always fluid, and we want to, the obviously the goal with all of this is that we apprehend this guy, and he's a adversary that is quite dangerous. He fled this scene. Does he have other locations, other caches of weapons? Now, the state police, the FBI, they're going to be loaded up for bear, wearing their tactical vests and, of course, having their own weapons of choice that will match his weapons. But he's a very dangerous, since he is a firearms instructor, very familiar. He's trained in National Guardsmen. So he's an adversary that is quite scary.
A manhunt underway in Maine right now for the gunman who opened fire on a bar and bowling alley, killing multiple people last night. We are learning more about the person of interest this morning. Robert Card, reportedly 40 years old, believed to be a trained firearm instructor and member of the Army Reserve. According to reports, Card spent 2 weeks at a mental health facility over the summer. Police say he recently reported mental health issues, including, quote, hearing voices and threats to shoot up a military base in Saco, Maine.
That's right. Card was last known to be driving a white Subaru Outback with a black bumper. Police say the vehicle was discovered near a boat dock in Lewiston, Maine, and moments ago, officials expanded the shelter-in-place order for residents as police continue their search for Card. Authorities are set to give an update on the tragedy at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. With that, let's bring in Marine veteran and former FBI agent Rob D'Amico. Rob, good morning to you. If this man is still alive, I mean, given his background as somebody who is a trained professional with weapons, has a military background, if he is still alive, what are police up against right now?
Well, there's two cases. One, if he's still in the vehicle trying to get distance from this location. And I think that's probably safer for the hunt. If he's on the ground and they have to go on the ground and walk around and look for him, I think it's a lot more dangerous for the police officers involved. Reminds me of the search for Eric Rudolph, where we were walking through the mountains in North Carolina. And basically the only way we were going to figure out we were on him was probably one of us was going to get shot. So I think that's the danger. If he's in a vehicle, it could turn into a vehicle chase, which I think is safer for the police as opposed to going through the woods looking for a person who is well armed, who has training and who has already killed.
Yeah.
Now the focus becomes gathering information. Describe the delicate balance that investigators are going through right now with regard to the victims. I mean, so many of these victims are in a hospital. They've just undergone the worst tragedy of their lives, yet they are crucial to providing information to try and tracking this guy down. Describe that delicate balance that the investigators are experiencing.
Well, I think actually the investigation of the witnesses, I don't know if many of them are going to be able to provide accurate information on where he's at. I think family members can. I think one of the family members actually got, when they first figured out who it was, kind of said, well, you need to also look at this other, I think it was another restaurant or bar that he may have said something about. So I think the witnesses that are injured, I think you want to have law enforcement and get in front of them to get their statement so it's fresh on their mind. Obviously, with medical attention not needed at that point, if it is. But what you really want to do is start.
You know, folks, obviously this was a well-planned, well-executed attack on these two locations. So we must also surmise that he has a well-executed plan of escape, including potentially collecting other weapons and going to other locations, possibly another vehicle standing by so that he could go to other locations. So it is so important that law enforcement does a very thorough investigation. Many things they can find out about him, obviously on the computer, high-tech databases, see any locations that he's ever lived, vehicles that he owns, locations that are common to him. Obviously, they know he owns firearms. So it's a full court press. I'm sure that they have all the federal units necessary, the ATF, the FBI, fugitive enforcement, all these boots on the ground. So it's a full court press, as they say in law enforcement. And this guy is not to be played with. I mean, it seems like we just recently were on the case of escaped prisoner Danilo Cavalcante, and who was at large in Pennsylvania for over 2 weeks. Let's hope that this individual, Robert Card, is caught expeditiously, as he's a much more dangerous individual than Danilo Cavalcante.
Start looking at social media. You want to start looking at cellular things like that to find out where he may be going. You may want to talk to his family and say, is there any place that he's talked about that he has some type of attachment to that he may be going? Again, when you're looking at the mental illness, something may mean something to him that he's actually going for. And then they can look at if he has a vehicle, maybe something in that vehicle has a tracking device on it. So many of them do now. Even a satellite radio, if that vehicle has XM radio or something along those lines, to help start looking at which way he's going.
Yeah, and you mentioned a family member. Fox News already spoke to his sister-in-law, and when the reporter spoke to her, the report is that she took a big sigh and said, yes, he is my brother-in-law. My children and I are with police right now. I don't have any further comment at this time. So that does prove that police are already talking to his family members. And also police say that they are aware that he may have a scanner as well as be tracking law enforcement moves.
Yeah, with his background, I wouldn't be surprised. He's planned this. He's whatever he did, he's thought about. It's gone through his head. Why wasn't he wearing a mask? Someone had said before. Well, he didn't care about his appearance. He didn't care about being found out, and that may lend itself to he wants a showdown with police, or if he gets cornered by police, it might be suicide or suicide by cop. But he didn't care about his appearance. He's gone through this whole thing. This was planned in his head, and probably where he's going or what he wants at the end of it has also been thought of before.
Based on his 2-week stay in a mental facility just a few months ago, I mean, summer of 2023, literally just a few months ago, why was he out on the street with a gun?
I mean, that you're going to have to roll back and try to figure out. Was there something, they're going to have to look at the laws. Was there something someone could have done, or it is mind-boggling.
This is a question that everyone always asks. Why is someone with a history or known mental illness, why, if he did 2 weeks in a mental hospital, why didn't they look into the fact that this Robert Card owns guns? And why didn't they remove his guns? So that's a question for the investigators. That's a question for them to look into. However, right now, that's not something that they're going to be able to answer right away. With all of these situations, it's fluid. All the information is fluid. And as I say all the time, if you want quick information, they'll give it to you. If you want accurate information, you're going to have to wait. And that's the key. You're going to have to wait to answer those questions, because guess what? Law enforcement does not have the answers to that right now. And, a lot of times that's why so much bad information was put out last night. Last night, the information was 22 dead, 50 to 60 injured. The number now is 18. Horrific number. Way too many. Horrible. 18 dead and 13 injured. So that's a hell of a lot different than 22 dead and 50 to 60 injured. The other thing is that only 8 at this time, at the time of the press conference, only 8 so far have been identified and their families notified. So we have to keep that in mind also. Those are the priorities to law enforcement, to getting the victims identified and the next of kin and the families notified. So all these questions about why, because he was at a mental history, those questions will be answered. However, not right now, because it's not the most important thing. The most important thing on a list of most important is apprehending this guy. That's the number one most important thing. And of course, I don't want to go through the numbers of what the second, third, but identifying the victims so that the families can be identified. That is so, so important. And I'm going to go back to Fox News to hear this FBI agent give his take.
Everyone, this is the clearest case of he made threats, he had weapons, he had training, and he talked about shooting, and still he was out on the street with a gun. So I don't know what went wrong. I don't know what the laws are exactly up there. Can they take the weapon? If they can, how long can they keep it? What defines all those things in there? So I think they're going to have to roll it back and figure out, hey, was something missed? Did someone say he could be out there or not do something? It's one of the clearest examples of who shouldn't have a gun.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly something was missed unless this gun was illegal, which is also an option. And we will definitely find that out in the days and weeks to come. We're also getting eyewitness accounts. One bowler who identified himself as Brandon spoke to the Associated Press. He said he thought at first it was balloons popping. It was about 10 shots he heard. He thought it was balloons, but then he saw this man with a gun and ran. He said he was sliding down the bowling alley as he was running, and then he hid in the machinery. He's one of the lucky ones, but there are others who were not. And now police are dealing with two separate crime scenes, 4 miles apart from each other, innocent victims inside, an untold number of them. What are police going to be doing in investigating these two crime scenes?
So I think that's where a lot of the federal and state agencies are going to help out. Obviously, this town doesn't have the resources to do two huge crime scenes like that. So I think the FBI is going to be bringing their evidence response teams up there. The Maine State Police will be bringing them down here. And that's where they're going to be really helping out the locals in processing those crime scenes, because those are huge.
Yeah.
And they probably, based on where the vehicle was and where he went, the crime scenes could be blocks long, depending on the evidence is out there. So I think the federal agencies and state agencies are really going to come together. They're going to put, they're going to have a working group and a command post, and they're going to divvy up who's doing what and how it's being done. And the thing with the crime scenes, you don't have to.
We got to ditch here. We're up against the hard.
Well, folks, what they're talking about now, of course, are the two separate crime scenes. So important that they process the crime scenes. At this point, horrifically, you can imagine some of the bodies of the victims are probably still on the scene there, because if they went, and I hate to use this language, but it's police language, if they went DOA on the scene, they're not going to remove them from the scene. They're going to stay in the crime scene. Only the people that were wounded would be removed from the scene. So you can imagine two distinct and separate crime scenes that are horrific. And the town of Lewiston, Maine, surely doesn't have the resources in their own town to process these type of crime scenes. They may need the Maine State Police, the FBI, all the federal agencies, all the alphabet for ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, FBI, of course, the Fugitive Enforcement Division, because I said on a scale of 1 to 10, the number one most important thing right now is to apprehend this guy. This is an extremely dangerous individual. The fact that he's so familiar with weapons, the fact that he's a trained soldier, makes him an adversary that we haven't seen in a very long time in this country. No doubt he had a plan. His plan included how to escape, an escape route. Most likely he has more weapons along his escape route. We don't know what else his plan includes. So the FBI, the ATF, the local police, the state police, all going after this guy, they need a plan. And these are trained tactical officers that are trained to do this type of work. Folks, joining me right now is straight out of Brooklyn, my co-host today, Phil Grimaldi. Phil, welcome to the show. A very somber day. One of the things, if anything, happened in this case that, and you can't even say it's good, it's just that the numbers were changed from 22 dead that was reported last night and to 18, which is still a horrific number. And last night they were throwing out the number 50 to 60 people were injured or wounded, and now that's dropped to 13. So we spoke about how these situations are fluid. Typically, the information that gets out there is not accurate. This press conference, the numbers have changed. Apparently, only 8 of those 18 have been identified so far. So there's 10 that have not. There's 10 families that don't know that their loved ones are one of the victims in these cases. Just an unbelievably tragic situation.
Yes, absolutely, Billy. It's a somber day. It's a somber day for Lewiston, Maine. It's a somber day for the United States. These type of shootings just happen too often. Again, we're tying it to a mental health issue from what we know about this individual. Thank God that the numbers did go down. I wish they went down to 0. However, that injury number was between 50 and 60 being reported last night. Now it's down to 13. Thank God. Hopefully, all of those individuals will recover. Still, 18 lives lost. Terrible. To me, it seems like these locations were specifically targeted by this Mr. Card, and I think that. Perhaps there's a lot more on the table that law enforcement isn't sharing. My only hope is that since he hasn't been captured in as many hours as this has been going on, that perhaps he may have taken his own life. I don't want to wish that someone kills themselves, but in this situation, I don't want to see anyone else injured, hurt, or killed. So perhaps maybe that could be one of the components of this thing. It sounds like law enforcement is right on top of everything. Again, when you saw that news clip with Bobby Chacon, he was talking about if someone sees something out of place, since this individual may be, he may have survival skills. He may be running through backyards and running through areas to try and hide from law enforcement. If you see something that's out of place, report it. Don't try to, investigate it yourself. If there's an open door in a garage, something of that nature, do not try and, investigate yourself. Just call 911, obviously.
This is the scanner audio from last night. We'll just play a bit of this.
What do they got? The shooter on Mollison Way at the bowling place.
Gonna be a male, black hair with a hoodie, looked like a rifle.
He said white male with a shirt round the back with a beard, a rifle. So we're going to divert our units to Schmengi. Schmengi's right now, another active shooter there.
7, I don't know if any description has been given out for the Schmengi's one, but again, a black sweatshirt, male with black sweatshirt, last seen headed toward the treatment plant. That's all she could tell me.
7 County got multiple victims at Schmengi's, multiple victims. I need every unit you can find.
County communications to all county rescue, stand by for activation. Multiple victims for an active shooter in the town of Lewiston.
So we had 2 separate active shooter incidents. First one will be at Spare Time. Second one, Schmengi's. That's where all the ASO units are.
It's going to be Spare Time Recreation for an active shooter incident. And that's going to be the town of Lewiston at Spare Time Recreation for an active shooter incident. Multiple people down. Have PD on scene, but the suspect is still at large.
I need you to respond to 24 Mollison Way. 24 Mollison Way at Spare Time. There's an active shooter situation going on there. Multiple patients.
To respond to the town of Lewiston for 2 active shooter locations. One's going to be at Spare Time Recreation. The second will be at Schmengi's. Again, the town of Lewiston for active shooter incidents. All available units to Lewiston.
So Phil, I mean, that's chilling. Just hearing that gives you the chills and is just so heartbreaking. But the first location was the Spare Time Recreation. That was at 6:56 p.m. last night, and 14 minutes later, he was at Schmengi's bar. So obviously he targeted these two locations. And when we think that 18 people are dead now, and they did give the breakdown of each location, they didn't give the breakdown as per the ages or anything like that. But I mean, all of that stuff will come out. But 14 minutes between locations, that is significant because it appears that, of course, as you said earlier, he targeted those two locations.
Absolutely, Billy. And the first location I think was 656, and apparently he leaves there. I think it's 7:08 is when the next 911 calls are coming in. So again, it's not like he went to that location, went outside and went very close to another location to start shooting some more. He traveled a distance of about, like you said, 12 or 14 minutes, whatever it is, and he went to that second location. I believe there was a report that when they spoke to some family members, they mentioned the third location that they think should be secured, that he may have frequented or something of that nature. So again, the investigation part of this, where we're talking to family members, talking to friends, perhaps could shed light on his location at this point. He must have spoken about that third location, or there had to be a reason that that family member said that police should go there and try and secure that location. So again, maybe he's disgruntled with these two locations. We don't know. Perhaps there could be people that he didn't care for there. Or maybe he just knew that it was going to be a busy Wednesday night at a bowling alley. There was some type of a youth event going on, I believe. There were bowling leagues there. I think it was a couples league. So again, is it that he knew that there would be a lot of people there? Again, at the bar, perhaps he knew Wednesday night might have been a specific event going on there. Did he target them for that? And again, when the governor spoke about the situation, she made such a really powerful point in my mind. These were people that were trying to enjoy some recreation, finish up at work. We're going to go bowling, or we're going to go have a drink in the bar, whatever it is. And they were taken completely by surprise. This is just such a horrific situation. Innocence. I mean, like she was saying, she was stressing, people were just out trying to have some fun, a little recreation, and unfortunately they were met with this horrific disaster.
This is the take from MSNBC.
Are dead this morning. Up to 50 may be injured in the community of Lewiston,
Well,
located about 30 miles.
We'd just like to know, to update that there's not
Yeah.
50 injured, there's 13. And we talked about it last night. The information that comes out quickly is usually bad information. But of course, everyone wants quick information, and quick information is never accurate.
North of Portland, Maine. Police say the gunman entered two separate locations Wednesday night. First, a bowling alley where he fatally shot 7 people before moving on to a nearby bar. Some of the victims may have been injured in stampedes as crowds raced to escape as the shooting started. Officials fear many teenagers could be among those killed and injured as the bowling alley was hosting its youth night. Police have identified now a 40-year-old male as a person of interest in connection with these shootings. He's still at large, considered armed and dangerous with an AR-style rifle. Police say they have located the man's vehicle in the neighboring town of Lisbon, but he was not in it. Residents in the area have been urged to shelter in place. According to a bulletin from law enforcement officials, the man was a military firearms instructor with about 20 years experience of military service. Noted the man recently reported mental health issues, to include hearing voices and threats to shoot up the National Guard base in the nearby town of Saco. It also said he was reported to have been committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks this summer and then released. The White House says President Biden, Vice President Harris have been briefed on the active situation. Biden spoke to Maine's governor, the state's congressional representatives last night, and offered the full support of the federal government. In response to the shooting, Maine's Commissioner of Public Safety sought to assure the public they're committed to apprehending the person of interest.
We have literally hundreds of police officers working around the state of Maine to investigate this case, to locate Mr. Card, who again is a person of interest and a person of interest only. And we'll continue to gather information.
Folks, that terminology has also been changed. He is now a wanted perpetrator. There's 8 arrest warrants for the 8 people that have been identified. I just, I sometimes have a problem when they know that it's a certain individual and they use that language, person of interest. I never was comfortable or liked that language. It was almost clear from minute one they knew who this guy was, but they used that language, person of interest. And I don't really understand why they're so reluctant to say, this is who we're looking for.
Information so that we can bring the suspect to justice and ultimately seek prosecution down the road.
Let's get right to the ground in Lewiston, Maine. That's where we find NBC's Emma Barnett. Emma, what's the latest there?
Yeah, hey, Willie. So I'm standing right in front of the bowling alley where the gunman went in about around 6:30 p.m. Last night.
6:56.
It has been eerily quiet here in Lewiston. I got here at around 12:30 a.m. And the only people that I have really seen out and about for the most part have been members of the media. I took a drive to the reunification center. The only people there that I saw were media and a couple cars, which I assume belong to the families who were inside. I asked the police officer how many family members are waiting to hear from loved ones and hoping and praying that they are still alive. He was not able to give me that kind of information. And something else that we just learned is that Lisbon school districts are going to be closed. As you mentioned in your intro, Lisbon is where that vehicle was found. The school districts are closed. The town offices are closed. And a lot of people are still sheltering in place. I did meet one woman earlier who she took a nap and woke up around midnight and saw everything that was happening in this town. She lives 4 miles away, and she came here to see what the scene was like and what was going on. And she described it as being shocked. She was shocked and devastated and just absolutely horrified. This is a small town where things like this, no one ever expects to happen until they happen. And it is just absolutely horrific and tragic.
Emma, can you give us a sense of the geography of these shootings here, there in Lewiston?
Phil, one of the things that from a law enforcement perspective, and a lot of times the news just keeps talking because they don't know what they're talking about. But from a law enforcement perspective, and we saw this in the hunt for Danilo Cavalcante, that inmate who escaped from a Pennsylvania prison and was at large for 2 weeks. Now, what we're really concerned with, of course, we want to capture this guy, but where is he? And I know that I'm confident that law enforcement knows a hell of a lot more than we know sitting right here, and that the news knows, pontificating about all these things that may or may not be important. However, this guy is an adversary that you don't see very often. He's a trained military firearms instructor. He's probably has survival skills. He planned this well, so he could have another vehicle loaded up with other weapons. He could have a location that he's holding up in. It could be in the woods, could be anywhere. But he's a dangerous, dangerous individual. And this area of Lewiston, Maine and the surrounding area cannot rest. They cannot go about their business until this guy is caught. And so where is there a perimeter? Is there a perimeter right now?
Well, I think the perimeter would be the whole area where the vehicle was found, obviously. And again, I think you made a lot of great points there, Billy. Perhaps he does have survival skills. He's obviously comfortable with a firearm, probably very accurate since he's a firearm instructor. I think the investigative part of it, looking into his deep dive into his computer, his social media, his telephone. Obviously, did he have some plans? Look at credit card purchases. Did he purchase anything knowing he was going to be he was going to be going dark and going into survival skills? Did he purchase perhaps protein bars or different things like that of that nature? Again, maybe he Googled specific locations in the area that he could possibly hide out in. So again, all of those things are going to be very, very important. I am certain that investigators are digging into that stuff, probably already have uncovered a lot of different things. Like you said, not everything's on the table. They gave a limited press conference there. They didn't talk a lot about what's the activeness of the investigation at this point. But you can surmise from what we know in previous cases, these are the things that they would be looking at.
Folks, we hear terms like, and it's evident of the times we live in, shelter in place. The first time I ever heard that term was during the Boston Marathon bombings. And now it's been a commonplace language that we understand as the language of living in this country in the 21st century, the reality of shelter in place because there's a danger, shutting down schools, locking down schools. How could they open a school today with an active shooter on the loose? Well,
A madman on the loose. Yeah.
right, the answer is they cannot. So until this individual is caught, and Phil mentioned earlier, there is a potential that he committed suicide. Many active shootings end in that way. However, until they find this guy,
right,
no one can go about their life. No one can go about their business because this is the most dangerous type of fugitive you could have. A fugitive that's armed, a fugitive that is trained, and a fugitive that knows how to survive because he's trained as a soldier. And all of these things make him the most competent adversary to law enforcement. And law enforcement, although they are trained to deal with this, it's still a very, very dangerous job for them to go after this guy and to ultimately apprehend him.
Look at that recent case in Pennsylvania with Danilo Cavalcanti. I think how long was he on the run for, Billy? It was
Over
about
2 weeks.
Okay, over 2 weeks. So there you have a person that didn't have any weapons. However, he adapted to the situation. He must have had some survival skills. He attained different clothing. So again, someone who did planning. I mean, he did that from jail. This is a person that was out on the street, probably had a lot of time to plan. So again, very, very concerning, very dangerous situation. The only thing we can hope for is a quick resolution to it. I'm sure that every law enforcement agency in Maine is on this, and let's just hope and pray that nobody else gets injured or hurt.
So two separate locations. We're looking at a map right now. First, the bowling alley, and then south to the bar where they were having a cornhole night, apparently. Went and
Phil, they're saying, someone in the chat said that these two locations are 4 miles apart. The shootings were 14 minutes apart. So he obviously didn't spend a lot of time. He did a shooting and then headed right out to the next location. I mean, that's unbelievable. Obviously, a man on a mission.
Yeah. Absolutely. It appears that he had those two locations in mind. He went into the first, he left, and then within minutes he's at the second location based on the 911 calls. So again, he, like you said, he was intent on what he was going to do. He went to those two locations. He did what he did. He's now in the wind. We don't know what his next move is going to be. However, the deep dive into all of his personal stuff, I think, is going to possibly reveal what his next move could be.
shot up those two places. Just about how this played out last night, just before 7 o'clock, according to police.
Yeah, so those details are still unraveling. And I also want to mention that in the bowling alley, there was a youth, it seems to have been a youth night, which just makes this even more tragic that we don't know for sure yet, but people fear that there are young people among the victims. And the hospital that a lot of these victims were transported to is just down the road, about 1.5 miles from here. People were also taken to Boston and another hospital in Maine as well. And these details are still emerging and still coming to the surface.
Okay, NBC's Emma Barnett live in Lewiston, Maine for us. We'll let you get back out and do some reporting, and we will talk to you later. So, Mika, police say news conference at 10:30 a.m. as of right now, where they may be able to provide more information. But the headline
obviously this is after the press conference. We got a lot of the information from a press conference. We'd reiterate that 18 people are confirmed dead, 13 injured. The numbers have been revised from last night, where they said 22. And 50 to 60 injured. So if there's anything to be thankful for, is that the numbers went down instead of up. However, we don't know the seriousness of the wounds of the 13 people that were listed as injured. In any event, again, this is a horrific attack, an active shooter. It seems like we have a lot of these incidents in our country. I see many of you people in the chat that are from other countries, Canada, Europe. You can't understand this, and it is hard to understand why someone would do something like this. And I don't want to get into the politics of guns. It's not the day or time to do this, what we need to do is focus on the victims and focus on the investigation and focus on apprehending this guy, because we're not going to solve the politics of this in a show like this, or anyone is going to solve the politics of this. However, these incidents do occur way too frequently. Many could point to mental health. But again, that gets into the political realm. I don't want to do that. We want to think of this community of Lewiston, not it just did 18 people lose their lives, but the whole community now, of course, is wounded by what has occurred here. And how do they get back on track? First of all, you need to grieve. The whole community as a whole needs to grieve over what occurred here. And you can't even imagine how a community can recover from something like this. And there's on the screen the picture of Robert Card, who now is no longer a person of interest, is now a wanted perpetrator for 8 murders. 8 arrest warrants for murder have been submitted to the state attorney general's office, and the full hunt is on for this individual. Hopefully law enforcement has an inkling. They have some kind of inside information of where he went, where he is. They'll have to lock down an entire area in the search for him, have an area that they can contain. We've heard all of that language in the Danilo Cavalcante escape prisoner case in Pennsylvania that lasted for 2 weeks. Let's hope that this doesn't last that long, as this is a much more dangerous individual than Danilo Cavalcante, a trained firearms instructor, loaded with an AR-15, I believe it was, a weapon much like that. Someone that is trained in how to use it, not only is trained in how to use it, trains other people how to shoot. So he is an extremely dangerous adversary. Phil.
You know, Billy, there's a couple of things. Listen, the political end of it, when you talk about the mental health issue, all of that stuff should be talked about after, this individual is located, after the grieving process has begun for the families. Let everybody recoup, and then we'll talk about that. But unfortunately, in today's world, the media is going to jump all over it. I am sure that today you will see people talking about the Second Amendment and on about that, but that's a conversation for another day. The other thing, when you're talking about how the numbers have changed and the fluidity of the situation, we kind of thought that was going to be the case. A lot of times there's chaos in the early stages of these things. Misinformation is out there right away. And in the world of 2023 with social media and computers and cell phones, it makes it even worse. When we were back in the day handling situations that were fluid, there was a lot less misinformation put out because there would only be the local media that would try to get information from the police department or go to the location. And again, sometimes there was still misinformation then, but it seems like it's much worse today. I'm just glad that the numbers were revised downward and not upward. I think that's one of the positives that you could pull out of this horrible, horrible situation. But again, when we were reporting last night, it really sounded much more horrific. I'm glad that there's less people injured and less people dead.
Well, Phil, I was also glad that he fled and didn't go to other locations and just keep creating carnage. Last night, Ed Davis, who was formerly the police commissioner of Boston, actually during the Boston Marathon bombing. Now, some of the information here, of course, now is dated and not timely, but Ed Davis is really a real knowledgeable law enforcement commander, and I always like to hear him interviewed and hear what he has to say in these situations. And this is from WBZ, CBS affiliate in Boston.
Well, I've just received some updated information that this is a military individual in the National Guard. So all of the things that I spoke about, the fact that he is experienced in using firearms, that's a long rifle, it might be an M4, the type that a military a soldier would carry. He's been trained in tactics, and and these guns are lethal out to hundreds of yards. So I would be very interested to hear where the vehicle was located. If he's made it into the woods, that complicates things at night. The officers up there probably won't have night vision equipment readily available to them. So they'll try to lock down an area and wait for daybreak to conduct a hard search of the ground there. Now, he may be in a populated area. I'm not sure. I know he has ties in southern Maine, from what I'm hearing from police sources. So they're searching really hard for him, and I'm sure that everybody in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine will be rolling towards this to assist law enforcement in Maine to try to take this guy, take him down and neutralize the threat.
And Ed, obviously you have, sadly, a lot of experience with a pursuit like this. We all know what happened around here, of course, back in 2013. The lookout for the marathon bombing suspects in the middle of the night in Watertown, knowing that they were heavily armed. A situation here where you also have an individual who, in your words, is deranged, out and about. And if you can, tell us about sort of how this sort of unfolds now. The next couple of hours, you're saying they're sort of waiting for daybreak. How do you even pass those hours knowing that there's the possibility that he is on the move, and to know that the danger is not over yet?
Right, so they'll be dealing with a logistics problem. There's a very sophisticated national incident management system that I spoke about earlier. However, there will be a flood of police who are, in some cases, self-deploying. There'll be police officers all around the area that will be flooding into the area to try to help. And so besides managing the assigned officers who will have the radio frequencies and the coordination necessary to launch a major search like this, the police officials will also be dealing with people that are coming to help who aren't specifically assigned. So think of this as a major logistics problem. The area where the suspect was last seen, where his vehicle is going to be flooded with police. And that's going to be the focus for the deployment of hundreds of officers. It's going to be critical for the people on the ground. And I remember this very well in Watertown, setting up sectors and coordinating perimeters so that you try to get the person in a particular area, like we saw in Pennsylvania recently, so that they can't escape a hard perimeter. Although the more experience the individual has in military tactics, the harder that is to accomplish. So this is a very, very difficult task right now for a relatively rural police agency.
Ed, with all of that in mind, how likely is it right now that they are also bringing witnesses into this investigation and even family members of this suspect or people who may?
Well, of course they are. Of course they're going to do everything possible with this investigation. But that's retired police commissioner of Boston, a really smart guy, one of the police chiefs across the country that they always go to in these situations because he's been through this with, of course, the Boston Marathon bombing. That's where we first heard the term shelter in place. Now we're hearing the term perimeter. Lock down but we don't, how do we know? What is the perimeter right now? Do we know where he is? Do we know where he fled to? We don't. Perhaps the police do. Phil?
Absolutely. They have to, err on the side of caution. I'm glad the schools are closed. I think everybody has to take a little bit of a step back today in that area. We don't know what the perimeter is. They haven't announced the perimeter. However, anything within a probably a 5 or 10 mile range of where that car was found, that vehicle that he supposedly fled in. I guess that would be a good starting point for a perimeter to lock down that area. Again, we don't know exactly what they have. We're not on the inside of this case. Perhaps they do have a better idea. And again, I think in that last interview, the police commissioner from Boston was talking about, it being dark presented even more of a challenge. Now that it's daylight, I think the searches could be a little bit more fruitful from the air, perhaps. And again, don't forget, this guy does have a long rifle. He could shoot from great distances, so the air power has to be cognizant of that fact too. God forbid, a helicopter searching an area or in a plane, he could take shots at that. So a lot of moving parts to this whole situation based on the experience of this individual, Mr. Card. So there's a lot of concern, but I'm sure that they have a good handle on it.
Robert Carroll, good point. The one question I haven't heard on social media, does he have a wife, a girlfriend, or exes? Good question, but all of the people that have any relationship to him, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're being interviewed right now by police.
100%.
They're not going to let any stone be left unturned. They're going to dig under every single rock. They're going to find out every single thing about this guy. They need to know, to give them a bead on where he possibly fled to. What did he say before this occurred? What was he talking about? Did he tell anyone? Friends, family members, as you said. What was his behavior like at work, at his job? We don't know if he has a job, what his job was. We know he was a firearms instructor, but was that his main job? He was in the reserves. So we need to speak to anyone that even knows this guy, has any contact with this guy. What were his habits? What did he do day to day? What were the locations he frequented? We need to know all of those things because, and again, the investigators are doing that right now. So it's nothing that I'm telling you that is not what the investigation is going to do. And what they uncover through speaking to people, speaking to his family, going to a big dive into his computer, his cell phone, all of those things. See if he was posting things on social media, looking at, just do a complete computer background on him, vehicles that he owns, homes he may possibly own, relatives he has in the area and outside the area. All of those things you can bet that law enforcement is doing right now.
Billy, one other thing, they talked about that he had mental health issues. I would want to speak to psychiatrists, psychologists, anybody that treated him. Now, there are HIPAA laws in place where you're not supposed to discuss a conversation between a patient and a doctor or a healthcare professional. However, in a situation like this, I would go to them and say, listen, is there something that he spoke about, a location, something that he had a beef with, something that he talked about with regard to getting even with, something that upset him? Even though those are privileged conversations, perhaps a mental health professional could put law enforcement in the right direction on something like that. One of the other things that you just talked about, does he have like a place where he would go for vacation, like a hunting lodge or a location where he would go with friends? Those are the things that I think police and law enforcement would be zeroing in on. But again, we want to get an idea of his state of mind before this incident took place. His state of mind since the summer when he was allegedly, in a mental health facility, excuse me, for a period of time. Those are the things that might provide and be fruitful for the investigation to find out what's the reason that he did this act and where he may be going, or where he may have also had, a problem with, what location that he had, could be targeting. There could be another location that he could be targeting.
Phil, you mentioned the mental health professionals that may have treated him. I think this would sort of excuse confidentiality. If someone had indicated that they were going to hurt somebody, they were going to kill somebody, or he actually has killed somebody, and I think that a mental health professional at that point can probably relax confidentiality. I could be wrong if there's any therapists in, because this, I think, supersedes his right to privacy.
100%. 100%.
So I don't think that any mental health professional.
There's an ethical standard too, Billy. This is a madman on the loose. And I would think that what you just said is probably correct. Perhaps it could be relaxed, but I would think that ethically, if you have information as a healthcare professional, that being this guy's doctor or this guy's therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever it is, and you have vital information that could lead to the location of this individual, then I would think that, there's an ethical line that you have to come across, and you have to say, let me come forward. Let me give the information to the law enforcement, to the authorities. We don't want to see any more victims in this situation. And I think legally, like you said, Bill, they'd probably be excused from liability based on the fact that they do have obligation to report if they have information that someone is going to be hurt, or if the individual is going to hurt themselves, they have an obligation to notify law enforcement.
Absolutely. I'm going to play a little bit this from Fox.
Our FBI Special Agent and Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan, the person of interest, Robert Card, he's a trained firearm instructor believed to be in the Army Reserve Station out of Saco, Maine, had reported hearing voices and threatened to shoot up the military base. He was committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks this past summer. And is, of course, considered armed and dangerous right now. When you hear a description like that, what goes through your mind?
Well, I think the law enforcement has a real challenge at this point for a couple of reasons. If this individual is delusional and has some training, as is being shown in the way that he's carrying the weapon and in the background, if this is in fact the individual that they're looking for, this delusion that he has seems to have extended past one location, which is typical for most people who have this type of a delusional attack and carry it out. So this individual is continuing his attack to the second location and then actually fled. So what that shows is that he is aware of what he's doing, and he now has a will to live. So that type of an individual, from what I've seen, is somebody who's more likely to fight back or continue their killing spree as they try to escape further.
Jonathan, it is 4 a.m. in Maine, pitch black. I don't imagine a lot of searching is being done in the woods right now for sheer safety of the individuals who be doing the searching. Because like you said, this guy's pretty tactical. This guy could be lying in wait and could ambush these officers. So my gut tells me that law enforcement right now is creating a profile on him in an effort to track him down. Cell phone, family, friends, the mental health facility where he was for 2 weeks in the summer. Describe this process. Describe what they're doing right now.
Well, I would say most likely that they are looking for him in the woods. A lot of law enforcement tactical units around the country, and I'm sure around that area, have night vision. And they also have helicopters that have access to FLIR, which allows them to see in the dark and see heat, along with the night vision that the officers may be using and most likely are using. So while that search is continuing, they're also looking at the cell phone usage, what towers that cell phone might be pinging off of if he is in fact using it. And so they'll try to narrow down where he's at using technology and using the ability to seek at night and take this individual out, which I will add is the most important issue at this moment, is finding him and stopping his forward movement by either capturing or killing him.
So he was driving a 2013 white Subaru, according to the sheriff of the Androscoggin County sheriff there. He said that law enforcement was able to find the car near a boat dock in Lisbon, which is about 7 miles southeast of Lewiston, where these two shootings took place. Card was not inside. So they found the car near a boat dock, person of interest not inside. What does that tell you?
You know, Phil, a lot of people in the chat, of course, they found his car near a boat dock there, conjecturing that he had a boat there or he had a jet ski, he escaped to some other location where he possibly had, but it's all conjecture. There's no fact here. Would that make sense that he would have a plan like that? Yeah, possibly, but we can't report it because we don't know if there's any truth at all to that.
I think that last person that you, the last video you played, he made a good point. What's his posture at this point? Was his posture to attack these two locations and then go commit suicide? Or was his posture to attack these two locations, go into hiding, try and get away, try to escape? I guess that's really the question of the day. What do we think his next move is going to be? And I think that you put up the picture earlier of him, the way he looked last night, and there was a picture of him clean shaven. I think that's a good idea because we don't know if he does have that posture to try and escape. He does have that posture to try and get away and continue his rampage. Perhaps he will change his appearance, maybe shave, cut his hair, different things like that. Obviously, maybe change his clothing. So again, if he really is hell bent on trying to elude capture and insert himself into the general population, he would definitely have to change his appearance. That's one of the things I think that needs to be considered.
Absolutely.
Well, again, it shows that he is pursuing his will to live by getting away from there, or it could be the end of his mental break, and it may be the case that they find this individual dead by suicide as the daylight comes. And I do want to say one thing. What I do hope law enforcement is doing, which is not typical for law enforcement, but is a tactic that they should start using, is where that car is found is not where they should necessarily only start searching from that location out. They should be predicting by how fast you can travel from that location and setting up a perimeter outside there and searching in at the same time.
That's a really important point. The fact that this guy targeted a bowling alley on a crowded youth night, no less. He also targeted a restaurant. What does that tell you about this individual? And quite frankly, Jonathan, his willingness to continue this horrific spree.
Well, it's interesting because in 2018, an individual took off all his clothes at 3 a.m. and went into a Waffle House and shot and killed several people before escaping in Nashville, Tennessee. And what is the similarity here? It is that if somebody is delusional, they will still be able to pick out where a soft target is, because a soft target is where, by definition of what that facility is, what their business is, it's going to draw in a group of people, sometimes large or a medium-sized group of people. A bowling alley, a restaurant, a bar at 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night is not unlikely to have a lot of people there, because that's around dinner time. And it's when people are, if they're going to go bowling or have fun, that's where the night begins. That's where he struck. He either knows those places or he just saw them as targets of opportunity because they were the soft targets. And people need to start realizing that even somebody who's completely delusional can identify where a location is that they can get the most bang for their buck.
Well, our reporter David Spun said on an email earlier saying the FBI has 3 satellite offices in Maine and Augusta, Bangor, and Portland. Agents from those offices likely all hands on deck. The Boston FBI office also said that they would be willing to assist in any way they can.
So, Phil, basically what we know about this, of course, the hunt is on, and this has gone from, the active shooter incident to the search for a wanted fugitive, a very dangerous wanted fugitive, a trained wanted fugitive. And again, all law enforcement agencies, FBI, you hear different offices, the Boston office, the office from Maine, they'll probably get the ATF in there, of course, fugitive enforcement. They're going to learn everything they possibly can learn about this individual, and the hunt is on. Until they capture this guy, and I know we're repeating things, but this is the nature of this case, is that no one can go about their life until this guy is apprehended in this little community, because the schools need to be locked down. Some stores apparently do need to be locked down, because this guy is a very dangerous guy. And who knows if his carnage is over.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jonathan Gilliam, that former FBI agent that was just on the last clip you played. The area where the vehicle was found, I talked about that earlier. There should definitely be a perimeter, maybe 5-10 miles out from there, from last night. Again, video cameras in the area could see possibly, did he have a second vehicle, leave the one vehicle there, escape on another vehicle? I'm sure that there's going to be the local law enforcement will be perusing video in that area to see if he did escape on foot, if he escaped in another vehicle. That's going to be very important. And the real problem that presents itself here, let's say he goes into the woods and he shoots himself. Now he's down. The search is going to be very complicated because we don't know if he's alive or dead. So those officers that are going to be doing searches in, let's say, a wooded area or some area that's not very populated, very difficult, because if he has a point where he could be far away with that rifle, they have to search into that area. He could pick them off. It's creates a tremendous challenge in the search for this individual. A lot of moving parts to this thing. We do know a lot about this guy at this point. However, till he's found, located, it's going to be a difficult period of time. And you're right. The lockdown of the schools, lockdown of the area, I think is all very, very important.
Well, you see, this is the bar Shemengi's, and that was the second location. The first location was the bowling alley, which he last night at 6:56 he entered that location, and then 14 minutes later he went to Shemengi's bar, which apparently is 4 miles away from the bowling alley. So he was on a mission. He targeted these two locations. There's no doubt. And then he shot people in there and then fled. And the last thing is they found his car near this lake, this body of water. And that's the last time he was seen. We always think of things like, because we're investigators, of video cameras. Was there video at the location where he dumped his car? Does it show where he left, where he fled to? Is there any other tracking devices potentially? Does he have a cell phone on him? You never know. These people sometimes don't think of everything, and he could still have a cell phone. And that's, of course, we know, and you true crimers know, that's a tracking device.
100%.
So all of these things are part of the investigation, and these are all the questions that we have as per this investigation.
I would think, Billy, if he does have a cell phone, they would have been up on it last night. And if there was movement on it or locations, I think that would have, led them to his location. I mean, listen, I don't know for certain. I don't have the inside track on the case. I'm not part of the actual investigation, but you would think in this day and age, the technology, you could probably get the location of the cell phone rather quickly in a situation like this. Again, could he have turned it off and then he's turning it on if he needs to get an update or something? That's also a possibility.
Legal-minded friends, Karen Cole. Bill, can you tell from his outfit how much ammo he had? No, but I could tell that he had other magazines. He was wearing what's known as tactical pants. And if you look at this photograph here, those big pockets, it appears that he has other magazines in those pant pockets. So that's a scary thought. So he was definitely, that shows, of course, premeditation, planning. So again, I can't guesstimate how much ammo he had on him. However, he had other magazines on his body, and that looks pretty clear based on what he was wearing. People had always asked, it doesn't appear based on his girth and his size that he was wearing body armor. It doesn't appear that he's got a vest on, and he could have a very light vest that would fit underneath that sweatshirt and you wouldn't see it. But if you look at this, usually if you're wearing body armor or a vest, you look quite a bit heavier than you normally would look. So it doesn't appear that in these photographs that we have that he's wearing body armor. Would you agree with that, Phil?
Absolutely. I think if you look at those two photos, like you said, some body armor is very thin. Perhaps he does have something under his sweatshirt there, but it doesn't appear to be. But if you look at his legs, the pants look like a cargo type pants, and it appears there's some bulkiness on both sides. Perhaps with military background, you would think, military, you go into combat, you always keep extra clips of rounds at the ready. So again, with his military background, his military training, that would probably be standard operating procedure for him. We don't know how much access he had to ammunition and firearms. Apparently, he did have this firearm that we know about. Again, investigation down the line to see how he attained that firearm, where he got it from, and how he was able to secure ammunition and things like that. That's going to be down the line. Right now, focus, get this guy, take him out, stop the threat. This community where this is all taking place, they're probably on a high alert, super lockdown. I mean, if you think about it, if you live close to where this is going on, how could you even get in the car and take a ride to the store to go buy a cup of coffee or a container of milk when this madman could pop out of the woods and start shooting?
After a mass shooting, the victims were at a restaurant and a bowling alley when they were gunned down. Several sources say more than 50 people were hurt. There have been no arrests so far, but police have named a person of interest, Robert Card, 40 years old, who is considered armed and dangerous. Here is the alleged gunman captured on surveillance footage as he entered the bowling alley. We have that video. There you go. Our Elaine Keano is in Lewiston, where people are being told to shelter in place. Elaine, good morning.
Good morning to you, Anne Marie. And it's not just residents of Lewiston who are being ordered to shelter in place. It's people in the entire surrounding county. Now, as a precaution, multiple schools and businesses have been closed today as well. And residents are being told to clear the streets as hundreds of police officers work around the clock to track down that person of interest.
We have an active shooter. We have multiple injuries.
Shortly before 7 p.m., bystanders young and old fled for their lives Wednesday night after a gunman opened fire at a bowling alley in Lewiston.
Spare time recreation for an active shooter incident, multiple people down.
After reports of the shooting, police released these photos of a man walking into the bowling alley and pointing an AR-style weapon.
Just normal night of bowling, and out of nowhere, he just came in and there was a loud pop. Thought it was a balloon.
This witness says he was inside the bowling alley for just 10 minutes when shots rang out.
I just booked it down the lane, and I slid basically into where the pins are and climbed up in the machine and was on top of the machines for about 10 minutes until the cops got there.
Police also released this image of the person of interest's vehicle in a parking lot, its driver's side door left open, which police later recovered nearly 10 miles away in Lisbon.
We have a second active shooter, Schmangies.
Police said they responded to a second location at a bar and restaurant less than 4 miles away, and then released this image of 40-year-old Robert Card as a person of interest in the pair of shootings.
Have PD on scene, but the suspect is still at large.
According to a Maine law enforcement bulletin seen by CBS News, Card is a trained firearms instructor believed to be in the Army Reserve based out of the city of Saco, Maine. He recently reported mental health issues and threatened to shoot up the National Guard base there. He was committed to a facility for 2 weeks over the summer.
We have literally hundreds of police officers working around the state of Maine to investigate this case, to locate Mr. Card. We'll continue to gather information so that we can bring the suspect to justice.
As the search for Card continues, dozens of victims flowed into the local hospital system, which could quickly become overwhelmed.
I've heard people that down there by the doors that have family members in there. There was a girl down there with 5 people, all got shot up, and they're like frantic.
While others gathered at a nearby middle school in Auburn, hoping to reunite with loved ones who were caught in the shootings.
This is a happier place right now in the entire area where people, witnesses saw traumatic events are coming together with their family and loved ones who were worried to death about them, and they're coming together. So it is happy. But on the flip side of the happiness, what you're seeing the turmoil and the trauma that they're going through, especially the witnesses.
Now, we are still awaiting additional details, and Anne Marie, we hope to learn more at a news conference.
Well, Phil, it's so heartbreaking, this stuff. A community just ripped to shreds by this. Right now, there's 18 families that have lost loved ones. 8 of them, as we were told in the press conference, that have been identified. 10 that weren't identified. So could you imagine? You have a family member that hasn't come home, and you are waiting for them to identify your loved one. Just unbelievable, the torture of that, the sadness of that. This community, we heard the governor speak about, it's a strong community. It's a close-knit community, and just fractured by this senseless act of violence by a mental patient who was a firearms instructor. Just somewhat baffling and difficult to believe and scary. And until law enforcement apprehends this guy, or we find out he committed suicide, or they take him out. And someone asked in the chat, will law enforcement shoot to kill? Well, they'll shoot to stop him, to neutralize the threat. That's the language we use. We don't use shoot to kill in law enforcement. So they will shoot to neutralize and to get rid of the threat. And but until Lisa Forte, yes, and 13 people injured, and we don't know their wounds. And could one or more of those 13, God forbid, also succumb to their wounds? And we pray that they do not. We pray that they heal quickly, and that they don't have life-threatening wounds. Just to recap a little bit, because we're going to go off the air now. 18 people dead in Lewiston, Maine at 2 separate locations, 13 wounded. We'll keep on top of this case as new information arises. Right now, all we could say is the hunt is on, and we have this community of Lewiston, Maine, quite wounded. They're getting federal help. They're getting local help, help from the state, help from other states, and all the law enforcement partners will be on this scene, and they'll be helping to capture this guy, Robert Card, and put an end to this horrific incident that happened in Lewiston, Maine. Phil, your final thoughts.
Well, I just want to piggyback what you said. We don't shoot to kill. We are trained to engage the suspect. If he should give up, all well and good, he'll be taken into custody. If there is a threat, you fire and you aim to stop the threat. Once the threat is over, that's when you stop firing. That's how we are trained. That's how we are taught. Let's hope and pray that there are no more victims in this case. Let's hope that law enforcement can locate this individual, put an end to his rampage, and keep a good thought and a prayer for the victims, and as well as the people that were injured and the families.
Well said. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, and with me today was a retired NYPD Detective Phil Grimaldi for Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.